Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you let them into your home, into your routine, into the very fabric of your family, only to realize much later, too late, that they were watching you the entire time? It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon when Coach Dan showed up at my door. My son wasn't home, off with friends, or maybe at the library, and I assumed the coach had come with some last-minute team update or change in practice schedule. That's how it usually went. He was always around. Always involved. Always polite. But that day, something felt different. He didn't smile the way he used to. He didn't joke or glance at his watch like he always did when trying not to stay too long. Instead, he stood there, eyes flickering toward the hallway behind me as if searching for something, or someone. "I need a moment," he said. "Just a quick private word. You can close the door behind me." I didn't. And what happened next shifted everything. He reached behind him, locked the door himself, and turned to face me with a look that made my stomach twist. It wasn't just discomfort, it was instinct, loud and screaming. Something about the way he stared, the way he moved, told me this wasn't about football. This wasn't about my son. It was about me. And what he thought he could take. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 41, a single mom, and the kind of woman who, most days, tries to make peace with a life that never quite matched the one I imagined. I work from home as a part-time virtual assistant, balancing email inboxes for strangers while mine overflows with reminders to schedule dentist appointments, reply to PTA messages, and sort the bills before late fees start whispering through the cracks. My son, Tyler, is 13. He's tall for his age, with that stubborn, scrappy kind of charm that reminds me too much of his father, and just enough of myself to worry about him a little extra. Tyler lives for football. Not the flashy, ego-driven kind, but the pure, mud-stained, breathless love of the game. His room is a shrine to the sport. Posters of pro players, scuffed cleats he refuses to throw out, and an ever-growing collection of team medals and worn-out mouthguards. Coach Dan entered our world 2 years ago when Tyler joined the local youth football league. He was everything you'd want in a coach, firm, but fair. Encouraging without coddling. A little rough around the edges, maybe, but that's part of what made the kids respect him. He was the kind of man who didn't raise his voice unless it meant something. He ran tight drills, gave honest feedback, and never forgot a kid's name. Or their parents. Especially not mine. From the very beginning, Coach Dan and I had a natural rapport. Nothing inappropriate, at least not at first. He'd offer a warm hello during drop-offs, sometimes a compliment on my parental dedication when I sat in the bleachers through wind or rain. I chalked it up to polite professionalism. I was just one of the moms, and not even the sociable kind. I kept to myself. That's how I preferred it. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice how his eyes lingered a little longer some days. Or how he seemed to appear at the grocery store more often than coincidence should allow. Sometimes, when Tyler would run off to grab his forgotten water bottle, Dan would linger beside me, asking about my job, my day, if I ever got any time for myself. They were simple questions. Gentle. Thoughtful, even. I told myself he was just kind. But kindness doesn't lean in too close when you're alone on the bleachers. Kindness doesn't make your skin prickle when he compliments your perfume, or call you by your first name when everyone else calls you Tyler's mom. Still, I let it slide. I had no husband at home to share the unease with. Tyler's father, Josh, left when our son was 6. Not in some dramatic, fireworks and fury kind of way. Just disappeared slowly. Emotionally first, then physically. He moved to Arizona with a woman who made kombucha and took sunrise hikes. We shared custody for a while, until his interest dwindled and my lawyer stopped returning his calls. Since then, it's been Tyler and me. That made Coach Dan's presence feel oddly comforting at first. He offered consistency. Encouragement. Someone who genuinely cared about my son's progress, who noticed when he improved, when he seemed tired, when he needed a confidence boost. That kind of care is rare. It can lull you into trust before you even realize it. Our community's small. We live in a neighborhood where lawns are manicured with suburban pride, where block parties come with name tags and recycled jokes about property taxes. People know each other. They wave. They ask how school's going. They trust their coaches, teachers, neighbors. I trusted Dan. That trust solidified last spring, when Tyler sprained his ankle mid-season. Dan called every evening for a week, not just to check on Tyler's recovery, but to offer advice, stretches, nutritional tips. He even dropped off assigned football from the team, just to keep Tyler's spirits up. I remember that night clearly. He stood on our porch in his coaching jacket, holding the ball with a sheepish grin. He's got talent, Rachel. Real talent. He's gonna go far if he sticks with it. I smiled, my throat tight with emotion. Thanks. I think he really looks up to you. Dan's eyes softened. I look up to him too, in a way. We laughed. He lingered. And when he finally walked away, I realized I'd been holding my breath. Over the months that followed, little things began to shift. Coach Dan stopped by the house more often than usual. Sometimes with practice updates, sometimes just in the area. He'd mention things I hadn't told him, like when Tyler got braces, or how he was struggling in math, and I'd wonder if he'd heard it from Tyler or noticed it himself. I didn't say anything. Not to Dan. Not to anyone. I told myself he was just being attentive. Until that Thursday afternoon. The day started like any other. Tyler had gone to a friend's house to study, and I was tackling my client's inbox with half a sandwich in one hand. Then came the knock. Firm. Repeated. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door to find Coach Dan standing there, jacket zipped, eyes unreadable. Hey, he said, voice a little too low. Is Tyler home? No, not yet, I replied. You want me to have him call you? Dan shook his head. Actually, it's you I came to talk to. Just for a minute. Something private. I paused. Something about his tone scratched at my nerves. He gestured toward the inside. You can close the door behind me. It's not long. I didn't move. Something inside me stiffened. I'd rather we talk here, I said, hand still on the doorknob. That's when it happened. His hand reached behind him. He turned the lock with a quiet click that seemed to echo through my entire chest. Then he looked at me, not like a coach, not like a friend, but like a man who thought he'd been waiting long enough. And suddenly, I wasn't sure I knew him at all. I stood frozen, one hand still on the edge of the door, as Coach Dan stepped farther into the hallway. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't glance back to see if I was okay. He just walked in, slow and sure, like this was his house, too. You all right? He asked, his tone softer now. You look a little tense. Tense? I echoed, trying to steady my voice. You just walked into my home and locked the door behind you. What do you think I am? Dan's face faltered. For a second, he looked like he might backpedal. But then he sighed, long and deliberate, and leaned against the wall like he belonged there. Like he'd already decided this moment was inevitable. I didn't come here to scare you, he said quietly. I just couldn't keep pretending anymore. Every time I see you, at practice, at pickup, I feel like I'm losing my mind trying to act normal. My heart thudded in my chest. Dan, I began, my voice sharp, you're my son's coach. I know, he said quickly, almost too quickly. I know how it sounds. But Rachel, I've been around you 2 years now. And every day it gets harder to ignore how I feel. I took a step back. The distance between us suddenly felt suffocating, like the air had shrunk. How you feel, I repeated, not as a question, but as a warning. His eyes searched mine. Don't tell me you haven't felt something, too. That did it. I raised my chin. What I feel is irrelevant. I'm a mother. You're a mentor. There are boundaries. He pushed off the wall, slowly approaching me, voice still calm but laced with urgency. I know boundaries. I'm not some creep. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. You already did. He stopped mid-step. I didn't recognize him anymore. The warm, encouraging coach who dropped off signed footballs and stayed late to help my son recover from injury, he was gone. In his place stood someone hungry, someone whose kindness had always come with invisible strings. I didn't come here to start anything, Dan muttered, his expression wounded. I came to be honest. You came to my home uninvited. You locked my door. That's not honesty, Dan. That's control. His face hardened. So, what, now I'm the villain? I didn't say that, I said, trembling. But I'm starting to feel like you might be. A long silence stretched between us. Then, a knock at the door. I jolted, relief flooding me. Dan stepped back as I rushed past him to open it. It was my neighbor, Karen, a short, curly-haired woman who smelled like gardenia and gossip. She was holding a plate of cookies and wearing her usual unbothered smile. Hiya, Rachel. Thought you could use a little sugar today. Her eyes flicked past me. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. Coach Dan was just leaving, I said quickly, forcing a smile. Dan stiffened behind me but said nothing. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing tension. She handed me the cookies with deliberate care. You take care, sweetheart, she said, her voice unusually warm. If you need anything, you know where to find me. I do. Thank you. When she walked away, Dan lingered in the foyer, arms crossed, jaw tight. I didn't mean to scare you, he said again, this time quieter. But I'm not ashamed of how I feel. You should be, I replied, closing the door behind her. You're crossing lines I didn't give you permission to even approach. He stepped forward again, slower now. You're lonely, Rachel. I see it. And I feel it too. You show up for your son every day. You put on a brave face. But I've watched you. And I've wanted to be the person who sees you for you, not just Tyler's mom. My throat tightened. Because for one small, dark second, I understood what he meant. Loneliness isn't just about being alone. It's about not being seen. Not being touched, not being thought of after the lights go out. And Dan had seen me. Or at least he acted like he did. But that didn't make this right. I've worked hard to protect my son, I said, voice shaking. To build a life that's safe for him. And now you're using that as leverage. He looked shocked. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Finally said, I care about you. I care about him. But I know this probably ends with me walking out of here. I just didn't want to leave without telling you the truth. For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I said, do you even realize the position you've put me in? I wasn't thinking. No, you weren't, I snapped. And now I have to decide whether to tell Tyler. Whether to report this. Whether to explain to the league why his coach can't be around him anymore. You've risked everything, for what? A fantasy. Dan looked genuinely pained. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. But it did. He nodded, slow and hollow. Then turned toward the door. I'll resign from the team, he said softly. Tell them I need to step away. You don't have to do anything. I'll disappear. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The weight of it all pressed against my chest. As he opened the door, he paused. You ever want to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. Then he left. I locked the door behind him this time. Double-checked it. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table while Tyler did his homework in the next room. I stared at the plate of untouched cookies and thought about the version of me Dan believed he saw. The version that might have been vulnerable enough to let this happen. Maybe I had been lonely. Maybe I had enjoyed the attention. But that didn't mean I'd asked for it. The next day, I called Coach Sanders, the assistant, who'd always seemed quiet but reliable. I didn't give details. Just said Dan had stepped down and that someone else would need to run the rest of the season. He agreed without pressing. That evening, Karen popped by again. Everything all right? She asked, handing me a small plant this time. I looked her in the eye. Things got uncomfortable. But I'm handling it. She nodded, not asking more. But I knew she knew. And somehow, that helped me breathe. For the first time in a long while, I felt the beginning of something I'd almost forgotten how to trust. Control. Over my own story. The weekend passed in a strange, suspended calm. Coach Dan didn't call. He didn't show up at practice. There were no late texts asking how Tyler was doing, no sidelong glances from the bleachers. The silence felt strange, both a relief and an echo. I should have been glad. But instead, I was unsettled. Because now I had a choice to make: tell Tyler the truth about why Coach Dan was gone, or let it dissolve quietly and hope the scar healed over on its own. Sunday morning, I stood at the sink, rinsing out Tyler's water bottle, watching the dew melt off the grass outside. He came into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and his football hoodie, sleep still heavy in his eyes. "Coach Dan's not at practice again today, is he?" he asked, cracking open the fridge. I hesitated. My hands stilled in the soapy water. "No, honey." He stepped down. Tyler frowned. "Why?" That was it. The moment. My choice. I dried my hand slowly, turning to face him. Because something happened. Something that made it clear he couldn't be around the team anymore. Tyler's eyes narrowed in that smart, intuitive way he gets when he senses there's more to the story. "What happened?" I took a deep breath. He crossed a boundary with me. Something that made me uncomfortable. "It's not your fault, and it doesn't have anything to do with how good a player you are." But I couldn't let it go on. Tyler stared at me, his mouth half open. "Wait, like he hit on you?" I blinked. The bluntness hit like a slap. He made me feel unsafe in my own home. The words settled between us. Heavy. Real. Tyler dropped into a kitchen chair and rubbed his face. "I don't get it." He was always cool. Like, he actually believed in me. I nodded, my heart breaking. He did. But people can care about one thing and still make terrible choices about another. That doesn't excuse them. He looked up, face flushed. "Did he hurt you?" "No. But he could have. That's why I stopped it. That's why he left." Tyler leaned back, exhaling sharply. "So what now?" "I'll make sure there's a safe, steady coach to finish the season. You can keep playing, if you want." He sat quietly for a long time. Then he said, "You should have told me sooner. I didn't want you to hate him." Tyler's jaw tightened. "I don't hate him. I hate that he ruined something that mattered." My throat burned. That night, I sat outside on the porch, the air still warm with the scent of June. Karen's wind chimes clinked gently next door. The quiet made space for thoughts I'd tried to keep buried. Why didn't I see it sooner? Why did part of me feel guilty when I had done nothing wrong? And the worst of all, was there a version of me, even a small flicker, that had wanted the attention? I'd spent so many years pouring everything into my son that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. To be desired. That need doesn't vanish just because you wear the title of mother. And Coach Dan, he didn't come at me with sleaze or arrogance. He came with admiration. With softness. That's what made it so insidious. He made me feel wanted. And when I didn't give in, he made me feel afraid. I was still sitting there when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I hadn't saved, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly who it was. **Dan***. I know I've hurt you. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it. I stared at the screen. For a long time, I said nothing. Then, almost against my better judgment, I typed back. **me**. You broke trust that can't be repaired. But I hope you learn from this before someone else gets hurt. His reply came a few minutes later. Dan***. I already did. My ex-wife once told me I blur lines when I get lonely. I never believed her until now. And there it was. The truth that hit harder than anything he could have said to my face. This wasn't the first time. I was not an isolated mistake. I was a pattern. A symptom of something much deeper in him. And I had been one moment away from falling into it. I set the phone down and wrapped a blanket tighter around my shoulders. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, followed by the sound of a screen door slamming. Life was still moving forward. I thought of all the moments that led up to this, the compliments, the casual conversations that felt a little too intimate, the lingering looks I convinced myself were harmless. It hadn't been about one moment. It had been a slow erosion. A careful slide from professional concern to personal craving. That's what made it dangerous. That's what made it real. I stayed out there until the stars began to bloom above the rooftops. I let myself cry, just a little. Not because I missed him, but because I missed the safety of believing someone could care without an angle. And in that stillness, something settled in me. He didn't get to be the defining chapter in my story. He was a warning, a lesson, a closed door. And on the other side of that door, I still had my son. Still had my voice. Still had myself. In the weeks that followed, life stitched itself back together, but not without visible seams. Coach Sanders took over the team. He was quieter, more methodical, lacking Dan's charm but also his volatility. Parents murmured when they learned Coach Dan had left suddenly, but no one asked too many questions. In small towns like ours, people know how to keep conversations polite, even when curiosity simmers just beneath the surface. Tyler returned to practice, though I noticed a shift in him. He was still focused, still driven, but the spark was dimmer. Something had been taken, his sense of admiration, maybe, or his trust in adults who promised to always do the right thing. I watched from the sidelines like always, but now I kept a sharper eye on everything. Everyone. Even myself. One night, as we sat watching a game on TV, Tyler spoke up. "You think he meant it?" "Who?" "Coach Dan. When he said he cared." I paused, not wanting to tarnish what little good Tyler might still be holding on to. But I couldn't lie either. "I think he thought he did," I said gently. "But caring about someone doesn't give you permission to cross their boundaries." Tyler nodded slowly, chewing on the idea. People always say adults know better. But sometimes they just mess up bigger. I smiled sadly. That's more true than most people are willing to admit. He leaned against me after that. We sat like that for a while, not talking, just letting the silence be a kind of healing. For me, the aftermath was quieter but more complicated. There were no police reports. No public fallout. What happened between Dan and me never became community gossip. Maybe it should have. Maybe if I had spoken up louder, it would have stopped him from doing something worse to someone else. But I also knew the world isn't always kind to women who draw lines after the fact. Who say no only when it's almost too late. Who dare to feel flattered before they feel violated. That paradox of being both a victim and a woman who felt seen haunted me. In therapy, I explored it. I admitted how part of me had enjoyed being noticed, and how ashamed that made me feel. My therapist said something I still carry with me. Acknowledging your vulnerability doesn't make you complicit. It makes you human. And protecting yourself, even after the fact, is still courage. I held on to that. Karen, my neighbor, began stopping by more often. Not always with cookies or plants, sometimes just a knock and a knowing glance. She never pried, but I think she saw more than she let on. "You're stronger than you know," she said once as we trimmed her rose bushes together. "And you're raising a boy who's learning what that looks like." That stuck with me. Because strength doesn't always look like shouting or courtroom drama. Sometimes, it's closing a door, locking it, and choosing not to reopen it, even when part of you aches to understand what might have been. I started taking morning walks again, before the town woke up. The air was quieter then, the light gentler. I liked how the world felt unbothered before schedules kicked in. I began noticing things I hadn't in years. The cracks in sidewalks forming tiny ecosystems, the way birdsong changes just before sunrise, the difference between solitude and loneliness. Tyler finished the season strong. He didn't win MVP, but he earned something better, clarity. He learned that heroes aren't perfect, and sometimes walking away from someone you once looked up to takes more strength than cheering them on. One night, after his final game, he hugged me tighter than usual. "You always got my back," he said. "Always," I whispered. That's what stayed. That's what mattered. And as for Dan, he faded out of our world like fog burning off a summer morning. I heard rumors he moved to another town, picked up work at a training facility. I thought, once or twice, about reaching out again. But then I remembered, there's nothing left to say to someone who didn't listen the first time. In the end, This wasn't a story about an affair. It wasn't even really a story about Dan. It was a story about trust, how easily it can be given, how painfully it's taken back, and how necessary it is to rebuild it from the inside out. I've learned that we don't always see betrayal coming in the form of a villain. Sometimes, it shows up in someone who thinks they're offering love but can't understand the harm their version of it creates. And maybe the hardest thing of all, maybe the bravest, is choosing to protect your peace when no one's watching. When there's no applause. Just the sound of your own voice whispering, "This is not love, and I deserve better." That's how healing begins. Quietly. One step at a time.